Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharmarashtra Jayate. International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate. Om Hri Om. Namaste, everyone. Welcome to all of you who are here tonight with us for this live stream, Satsangha Pravachana talk that I'm going to give. It's a little bit odd that we're doing this on a Tuesday rather than a Monday, and I apologize for that and for the short notice, but I know that several wonderful individuals tried their best to let people know that this is happening, so I'm sure that little by little people will be trickling in to hear this talk. And this talk essentially is going to be about removing our faults. Before I dive into the talk, however, let me just say a few things that I usually say to people. And that is, first of all, if you have not yet done so, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. This YouTube channel is not like any other YouTube channel on earth. For that matter, any video channel on earth. Everyone can make that claim, even those channels that are extremely common can make that claim. But we back up that claim by giving you information that is the most ancient information on earth, that is information that is eternal, that is information that pertains to Sanatana Dharma, the eternal natural way. And we give you that information in a way that is 100% authentic and real, and that actually truly does answer people's philosophical questions about the meaning of life, as well as helps individuals to actually practice Sanatana Dharma. So again, if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please do so. Also, we have other channels as well. If you look in the chat, you'll see that we have a link to our BitChute channel as well as our Odyssey channel. We were having some difficulty with our Odyssey channel, and for some bizarre reason, we couldn't upload anything for several months. But that's been fixed now. We contacted them, and the people at Odyssey were absolutely wonderful. They fixed it very quickly, within 24 hours. So our Odyssey channel is now working again, so we will be uploading many things on there. Please subscribe to both of those other alternative channels as well. The other thing I want to say is please visit our website, dharmacentral.com. When you're there, please join our email list, look at our many books that are available, as well as please become a member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society if you can. By becoming a monthly tithing member, you help us to continue to do all the work and all the many projects that we are doing. So please consider that if you're in a position to do so. So with that, I'm going to dive into this talk. And this is going to be from a scripture that's not very well known to many people. However, it is indeed an extremely recognized scripture. It's one of the Dharma Sutras. The Dharma Sutras are a genre of literature, many books written by many different rishis and sages that deal specifically with Dharma, rules of Dharma, laws of Dharma, as well as many other subject matters, depending on which one of these texts you're looking at. Well, this is the Apastamba Sutra, and this was written by Apastamba, who was indeed one of these ancient rishis. So this is what's considered a Dharma Sutra, and this, what I'm going to read to you, is very specifically from this Apastamba Sutra. And I'm going to read you this very interesting verse that talks about a tiny number, and they are a tiny number, of some of the inner faults, anartas, or some of the inner faults that any given individual in illusion may have, but it also gives the prescription of how to transcend these faults, how to raise ourselves above these faults that, again, many of us have. So first, let me read this to you, and then I'll be commenting on this very good 2 verses. First, let me tell you, this is from Apastamba Sutra, Prashna 1, Patala 8, Khanda 23, and it's verses 4 and 5. So that's a lot. So obviously this is a significant work, considering that it's divided in that way. And this is how the verse proceeds. Now we will enumerate the faults which tend to destroy the creatures. These are anger, exultation, whining, covetousness, perplexity, doing injury, hypocrisy, lying, gluttony, slander, envy, lust, secret hatred, neglecting to keep the senses under control, and neglecting to concentrate the mind. The eradication of these faults takes place through the means of liberation called yoga. Very nice. So as we can see, this is actually 2 verses that are here, verses 4 and 5, and it does indeed give quite a list. You know, you've noticed in the past, both with these live streams and verses that we've commented on, but also if you yourself have just read any of the Vedic scriptures in the past, that very often there will be lists of things, lists of attributes, lists of characteristics, both negative and positive, lists of many, many different sorts of things. And while for some individuals, they tend to kind of start to fall asleep if they start to hear a list, the truth of the matter is, for individuals who are wise, these lists are extremely helpful, actually. Personally, let me tell you, I actually love it when I'm reading a Vedic scripture like this one, the Apastamba Sutra, and suddenly there is an enumeration, a list of something that is important to know. And the reason why is because it is something that is that consists of examples of what is being spoken of. So, for example, if this author were to simply say, avoid all faults, and then go on, well, that's a very nice general pronouncement. But we also need to know, well, can you give some examples of these faults? And then vice versa. If in some scripture it says you should develop good qualities, but then it just goes on without giving a list of some of those good qualities, well, it's not as helpful. So this is illustrative of the fact that indeed there are many faults that an individual can have within them. And again, this is a tiny portion. This consists of just some examples of some of these faults that we're meant to transcend. But I would like to go through this a little bit so that we understand what is being said here. So first of all, starting with the very first sentence, which is actually quite significant. Now we will enumerate. You see, there's that word, again, a list. Now we will enumerate the faults which tend to destroy the creatures. Interesting. So just with this very first sentence alone, Apastamba makes it quite clear that these faults are not just, a matter of preference. I, Apastamba, just don't like these things, and so therefore I'm telling you stay away from them. No, this is not subjective. This is not opinion. These are faults which, unless they are rooted out from the individual, they will destroy you. They will destroy you. They will destroy your peace of mind. They will destroy your decision-making ability. They will destroy your relationship with others. They will destroy who you are as a person. They will destroy how you view yourself, how others view you, and I can go on. So thus, if a person says, well, this is just somebody's opinion, what's wrong with lust and envy and anger and blah, 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 blah. So thus being a radical subjectivist, in other words, someone with a very low IQ and very small philosophical acumen. Rather, what we need to understand is that these are indeed objective criteria by which we know how we can have a good and productive and happy and joyful life. This is not just someone's opinion. Indeed, I don't want people to literally do this. I'm just saying this for the sake of this talk. But if you indeed want to see whether what Apastamba here is saying is true, then I would challenge you to indeed take all these faults and follow them to the maximum, and you'll see your life destroyed. Indeed, be as angry as you can. Be as covetous as you can. Whine. Be a hypocrite, etc. as much as you can, and see how long it will last. You will lose everything. You will lose your friends. You will lose your loved ones. You will lose yourself. So indeed, these are objective criteria. This is an objective criterion by which we know how we are to achieve happiness. We are to avoid these things. Otherwise, these will destroy creatures, all creatures, but especially humans. Now, let's go on and let's look at a few of these. Now, what are some of these? Let's start with the first. These are anger. First of all, anger. Anger is indeed a normal human emotion. Indeed, not long ago, I think maybe 2, maybe 3 live streams ago, someone asked me about emotion and something to the effect of, oh, can an enlightened being have emotion? And I went very in depth and explained that, oh yes, you can have sadness, you can have a little depression, you can have a little bit of anger, etc. Emotion is a very normal thing, and even what to speak of normal human beings, even when you achieve enlightenment, you still have emotion. The difference is you are not consumed by them. You can have a flash of anger. You can have sadness for a little while, but you're not consumed by these things. The ordinary person, the normative individual, what some would call the normie, they're often consumed by these things. In other words, they have zero control over these things at any time, at any point whatsoever, and they are destroyed by these negative emotions. Whereas the yogi, again, it's not that they can't have a flash of anger. If someone attacks them, they're allowed to have a flash of anger. It's not that they can't have a little bit of sadness. So what is being spoken of here is indeed the normative sort of anger in which anger has become your master. Rather than just something that you periodically experience, it is something that you have zero control over. And you get angry all the time, at the drop of a hat, at the slightest instigation, and more. Your anger is based upon a self-serving illusion. So this is the sort of anger that indeed we are meant to transcend as much as is possible. And how do we do that? Well, that's going to be the question that I ask about each one of these things on this list, and the answer is given at the very end. So I'll save that for later. But indeed, we are to cultivate, if anything, the very opposite of anger. You see, let me give away the secret right now before I even get to the very end, actually. One way in which we can transcend all of these negative tendencies that are there within us, cultivate the opposite. Cultivate the opposite. So whatever is the opposite of anger, cultivate that. Cultivate love, cultivate kindness, cultivate compassion, etc. So you see where we're going to be going. But let's go on. Exultation. Exultation. Exultation, not a word that you hear very much these days in the English language. It's very unfortunate. This is just an aside. I've seen, as someone who has read so many books, and especially older ones, as far as I'm concerned, if a book is written, for the most part, with a lot of exceptions, but for the most part, if a book is written, let's say after 1940, it doesn't hold as much value to me as older books. So as a result, a lot of these words like exaltation, I've encountered many times before, and it's unfortunate that the words that seem to go out of usage, that have gone out of usage in the last roughly 50, 60 years, are some of the most important ones. So exaltation, what this means is an overexcitement about something that we perceive as something that we wanted. This is what it means to be exalted, to be in a state of exaltation, where we're just so excited, we're manic. Indeed, we're manic about, it could be the smallest thing. But it's something that in our illusion we think we want, we think is in our best interest, etc. It may or may not be, but we think it is. And as a result, yes, we become manic about it. We start to rejoice over the smallest thing, including things that are insignificant. And again, like with the anger that I was talking about earlier, or any negative emotion, it is a state that we have no control over. So this is something that we are to avoid. And rather than exultation, what we should be cultivating is a state of equanimity. In other words, whatever comes our way, good or bad, we obviously always try to avoid that which is unhealthy, that which is sinful, that which is going to harm us. And of course, we want that which is the opposite, healthy, good, etc. But at the same time, we have a sense of equipoise. In other words, we're neither too elated when something good comes our way, neither do we go into mourning when something bad happens. So indeed, we cultivate the opposite of exaltation. Now, the next one. Here's one that has become a very popular fault in the last, 20 years or so. Whining, complaining. Again, something doesn't go our way. It can be the smallest thing. Today, of course, we've seen that indeed whining has become the national sport. It's become the national pastime. The slightest thing doesn't go our way, or we are triggered by something. We feel offense by the smallest thing that, 20, 30 years ago, it would never have even registered on anyone's radar as offensive. But today, something triggers us, or something doesn't go our way. And like babies, like children, very often people today will whine and complain ad nauseum. Well, this is something that obviously is a very bad quality. And the reason why this is the case is because it's showing the opposite of gratitude. Rather than complaining, rather than whining like a child about the smallest little slight that we think has come our way, rather what we should practice is a type of stoicism. What we should practice is this idea that in actuality, I am grateful for all the blessings of God, rather than complaining about anything that I think has offended me or hurt me or insulted me, etc. Rather, we are to cultivate the opposite. We are to instead have gratitude toward God and toward the universe for those good things that did come our way. And indeed, I've said this many times before, if we do not have gratitude for the good things that come our way, soon enough the good things coming our way will come to an end. So this is why we want to cultivate the opposite of whining. Let me go on a little bit more. The next one is covetousness. To be covetous. This means being greedy. This means being an individual who you want and want and want and want and want everything that you think you desire. Whether important things, unimportant things. And we're not talking, of course, about the things that you need for survival. If you're thirsty and you want water, that's not being covetous. If you are hungry and you need food, that's not being covetous. We're talking about being covetous, meaning that, you already own 3 cars, 1 luxury car, 2 sports vehicles. You have a Corvette, you have a Mustang, you have, an Alfa Romeo, you have several cars. But all you can dream about is owning even more and owning even more and owning even more, not keeping in mind that in actuality you can only drive one at a time. You just want them for the sake of wanting them, and you want them so that you can show off and brag and take photos of them and put those photos up on Instagram and Facebook and brag to the world about your collection of cars. That's covetousness. That is covetousness. That is the situation in which you already have what you need. In fact, more than what you need. Again, here comes that gratitude again. Rather than having gratitude, what we do is we just want more, and we just want more, and we just want more, ad infinitum, ad nauseam. There's no limit to people's desires. If you have enough wealth, once you have your 100th classic race car, you still want 101. And it just goes on. Well, this is unfortunately a fault that is truly debilitating, because again, you lose all sight of gratitude, but you also begin to lose sight of what is truly of importance in one's life. It's not to simply collect things. That is not the meaning of life whatsoever. But the meaning of life is rather to use one's time and one's resources to truly, in an eternal way, benefit ourselves, that means spiritually, but really in every positive way, and to benefit others. That is why we're alive, not just to collect and collect and collect meaningless items. Let's go on. Perplexity. Perplexity means essentially being in a state of bewilderment, being in a state of confusion. where everything is perplexed to us. We just can't understand anything. Now, this in itself, interestingly, this state of perplexity, another word that unfortunately don't hear very much these days, but that is a very important word. Again, in older books, from the 1930s, 20s, 40s, and much older, you would hear this actual word, not just perplex, but perplexity. This is caused by several different things, including, let's say, mental disabilities, mental illness. It's caused by, indeed, having a low IQ, not being a very intelligent person, not being able to understand the nuances in life or whatever is the subject matter that is before us that we're attempting to analyze and to understand and comprehend, etc. Perplexity is caused by many different things. More than anything, however, perplexity is often caused very generally simply by illusion itself. When we are in illusion, we are bewildered. When we are bewildered, we do not have the ability to have a sharpened mind, a mind that is sharp like a sword. And when we don't have that, we're perplexed by everything around us. We're confused by what is reality, what's up, what's down. What is, this person just made this rather simple philosophical argument, but I'm going to have to analyze it for 15 years and see if I can make sense of it, etc., etc. We are to avoid perplexity, and the way that we do this is, indeed, we cultivate the opposite. We cultivate buddhi, we cultivate jnana, we cultivate the intellect and knowledge, true knowledge, the ability to indeed think rationally, philosophically, with discernment, with discrimination, etc. We develop our thinking ability. How do we do that? Well, again, the answer is coming later. But this is what we are to cultivate rather than perplexity. Next, now that we go on, doing injury. Doing injury. Indeed, we are meant to be non-violent in who we are. Now, don't worry for all those out there who think you're so militant. Of course, we have the ability to defend ourselves to the utmost capacity necessary. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, don't be a bully. Don't be someone who instigates violence against the innocent, because in that case, you're not a warrior, you're a demonic fool, and a low IQ one. That's all that this is saying by ahimsa, non-injury, that we are not to be violent in this offensive sort of way. Oh, we have the ability to defend ourselves. Indeed, as I've said a million times, Sanatana Dharma is a tradition of some of the greatest warriors in all of human history. So this is not what we mean by avoiding doing injury. Again, what we mean is in an offensive way, doing injury against other individuals who are innocent, who they haven't bothered us in any way whatsoever, and simply to be a bully, simply because we have the illusion that we're a warrior, really a bully, we're going to instigate fights with other individuals. Again, a true warrior does not go into an area of innocent people and instigate fights. That's the low IQ bully who does that. A true warrior, indeed, only engages in such activities to defend himself and to defend the innocent and to defend Dharma, solely and exclusively. So indeed, we are to avoid doing injury in every way. Very good. Let's go on. Hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is a very big one. This is something that must be avoided by any individual who considers themselves to be a spiritual person, a seeker of truth, a philosophical individual, etc. Someone who has fidelity to that which is true. And what does this mean? Very simply, there are three modes of doing. There is what we think, what we say, and what we actually perform, action in the world. All three of these must be in harmony. So in other words, what we believe, that is, what we hold to be true, intellectually, philosophically, must coincide with what we say. And both of those must correspond with what we do. And there is to be no distinction, no contradiction between any of the above. We can't hold to a certain belief that, vegetarianism makes sense to me, for example. Intellectually, philosophically, yes, I've looked into this very deeply. I've looked into the philosophical and ethical arguments for and against vegetarianism, and intellectually I've decided that yes, it makes sense to be vegetarian. but I'm not going to speak about it. I'm not going to openly support vegetarianism, and I'm certainly not going to be a vegetarian because, oh, I'm too addicted to meat. That's being a hypocrite. That's being a hypocrite. And you can see how I can obviously offer a million such examples. But just using this as one example, indeed, if it comes to the point where indeed philosophically, ethically, spiritually, vegetarianism makes sense to you, then you should have no difficulty verbalizing this and explaining to others, not preaching to others, that's not what I'm saying, but if someone asks, they notice, oh, everyone here is having steak, but you're not, you're having vegetables. Why is that the case? You very simply explain, oh, I'm vegetarian. In accordance with my spiritual practices, I don't believe in eating meat because it's an unethical practice. And more, you should be eating a vegetarian meal. So again, all three of these modes of activity should be in harmony with one another. When you do this, you're not a hypocrite. Very good. Lying. Lying is a very, very important one. An individual who is a spiritual practitioner of any sort whatsoever, from a very beginning person all the way up to a guru, an enlightened being, an acharya, etc., a rishi, etc., etc. They are to avoid lying as much as possible. So if you are married to the truth, then what that means is you avoid lying. You avoid telling people the opposite of what is truth. Now, this is not to say that you cannot have a private life. You see, unfortunately, sometimes what people think is avoiding lying is, well, therefore, every private thing about myself is everybody's business now. And that is silly. No, there is such a thing as dignified privacy. You see, to avoid lying, this doesn't mean that, oh, now everyone must know quite literally every single thing about me and what my entire medical history and etc., etc. Oh, what's my social security number? Here you go. No, obviously, to not tell people private things, that's not lying. Rather, what is lying is stating something that is the opposite of what is true. By definition, that is lying. And now, how does one avoid lying? By stating truth. By stating truth, by stating truth. Now, let's go on. Gluttony. Gluttony. Gluttony, unfortunately, and I say this as an American, so Americans, please don't take offense. And sadly, I know that this is affecting much of the rest of the nation, of the world as well. Gluttony is something that has become extremely, extremely big in recent years, the last 1-2 generations or so, to the point where it has become a problem. It is truly, I mean, I'm joking about this because, many people do, but the truth of the matter is gluttony is an epidemic. It's something that leads to ill health. It's something that leads to low energy. It's something that leads to, just not looking good, not having confidence in oneself, etc., etc. But more, it is a kind of addiction. Now, when we talk about gluttony, we're talking about individuals who, have no control over how much they eat, so thus they tend to eat 2, 3, 4 times more than is necessary for an individual of their same height, stature, etc. And B, they have no control over what they eat, not just the quantity, but also the contents of what they eat. They will eat anything that's around them. They'll eat very unhealthy food, sometimes gourmet food. Sometimes gluttons are individuals who they enjoy very, very rich, very expensive foods, but foods that, 3 bites would be 1,000 calories, full of creams and sugars, etc., etc. So in this way, basically having zero control over one's mouth and more, making the eating and the tasting and the experience of food more important than anything else in one's life. More important than your health, more important than truth, more important than your family and what they think of you, etc. So thus, such individuals, of course, tend to become morbidly obese. Individuals who, given their height, let's say they should be 160 pounds and instead they're 360 pounds. That's gluttony. That's gluttony, where again, the sensation of eating is more important to the individual than almost anything. Rather than being addicted to heroin or crack or meth, they are addicted to eating. And like with any addiction, the truth of the matter is, with enough effort, with enough willpower, you can indeed control it with enough support. you can indeed control it. And indeed, how do you control gluttony? By awareness. By awareness and by using your will to choose what you eat, to choose the proportions, make the proportions smaller, to choose the nature of what you're putting into your mouth. Again, don't just go to Chick-fil-A or any hamburger place that's out there, have a hamburger that's 2,000 calories. No, rather be very careful with what you put into your mouth. Try to make sure that it's healthy, in addition to tasting good. Very good. Slander. Slander. This is one of the almost universal sins of human beings. From individuals within their own families or within their groups, their groupings of friends, to every people in every single village, and etc., etc. Slander, gossip, just talking about others, talking about them behind their back, lying about them, saying things that are not true, etc., etc. This is unfortunately one of the biggest and most universal and most prevalent faults that you find among others. And why? Well, A, it's easy. It's very easy to do. It's so easy. It's a cheap thing to do because it's so easy. It doesn't cost you anything except your reputation and other things that it will cost you if you're a slanderer. It is something that psychologically makes the individual who's doing the slander, it gives them the illusion of feeling better about themselves. So thus they are individuals who are lacking self-confidence to begin with. They are individuals who have very little faith in themselves, in their own abilities. So therefore, by tearing down others, i.e. lying about them and slandering them, they think that it builds them up a little bit. It doesn't. It actually hurts them more than the person they're slandering, etc. What is the opposite of slandering? How can we stop slandering? Do the opposite. Praise people, both to their face and behind their backs. There's nothing more rewarding and more wonderful for an individual than when they hear that you didn't just praise them to their face, but a friend of theirs reports to them that, oh, so-and-so said the most wonderful things about you when they were talking to me in private. That makes that person who is the object of that praise just feel elated and like you even more. So indeed, if you want to be an individual who has friends, who has people who care about you, avoid slandering. Because this is the thing. Unbeknownst to you, when you slander someone else, you see, people will know that person. They'll know intuitively whether what you're saying is true or not. And if they determine that it's not, you're the one destroyed. Let's go on. Envy. Envy. Oh my Lord, envy. This is a fault alone that we could talk about for a very long time. Indeed, envy envy tends to be, speaking of slander, envy tends to be one of the foundations of slander. It's one of the reasons why people slander others, is indeed because they're envious. And what does it mean to be envious? It means that you see an individual who is in some way, shape, or form, in some manner, superior to you, better than you, more talented than you, they have more than you, etc. And rather than doing the right thing, the ethical thing, spiritually speaking, and in your mind, if not even verbally saying to them, but at least in your mind, saying, oh, they have been blessed by God. That is wonderful. And especially if they're a good person. Especially if they're a good person, you realize that's wonderful, that they have either good qualities, they have more than me, etc. And appreciating this fact, rather than doing this, the envious person hates that individual who is in some way, shape, or form better than them. And they themselves are too lazy to do what is necessary to earn a similar stature. See, whatever that other individual has, for the most part, there are exceptions. If a person is a multi-billionaire, it's going to be hard to match that. But within reason, if a person has good qualities or they have some possessions that you don't have, a nice house or something like that, You have the ability, especially if you live in America or some other semi-free nation, you have the ability to work hard to develop the inner qualities that you need to match that person's stature, maybe even surpass them. But rather than doing that, what an envious individual does is they live within their own mind, within their own emotions, within their own envy. And rather than using that example of the person who is better than them or has more than them, rather than using that example to inspire themselves to work hard, they instead live in a fantasy realm where, oh, this person has more than me. That makes them evil. And now you just stew in a rotten soup of envy, rather than doing what is necessary to match that person, maybe surpass them. Rather, you never will, because you're living in a fantasy realm of hatred where you hate that person because, again, you perceive that they're better than you, they're nicer than you, they're handsomer than you, more beautiful than you, they have more than you, etc., etc. So do not be envious, rather cultivate the opposite. Cultivate gratitude for what you do have, and engage in hard work. Engage in hard work both on yourself, but then also in the world, such that you also will attain a high stature and there will be no reason for enviousness. Very good. Lust. Lust. Oh, another one that is universal that we can go on about forever. What is meant by lust very specifically, and I always have to make these caveats with several of these qualities, actually, several of these terrible faults, like I did with not doing injury, etc. Same thing with lust. What is meant by lust very specifically is indeed unwarranted and uncontrolled sexual desire. So, let's say you see someone of the opposite sex and you're attracted to that person. Is that a horrible thing? No, that is what is called dharma, that is nature. It's natural to be attracted to people. It's natural to want to find a partner, to eventually marry them, etc., etc. When you are in that marriage, it is very natural to be very much attracted to that person, everything they are, their inner qualities, even their features, and indeed want to engage in normal sexual relationships, loving relationships with that person. That is very normal. What is meant very specifically by lust in this context is indeed, like with so many of these faults, an attraction, a sexual attraction toward others that A, is based almost exclusively on sexuality, A, but B, to an uncontrollable and unsatiable extent, to the point where, quite literally, this is the only thing on your mind. And again, like with gluttony, like with several of these things, it's almost like an addiction. It's almost like an addiction where you have no control over it, and indeed you begin to see other human beings not as human beings, not as persons, not as individuals who, yes, they may have an attractive form, but they also have an inner realm, an inner personality that is infinitely more complex and beautiful than merely their external form. You don't see that. You just see the body. That's lust. And that is what is to be avoided. What is the opposite of lust? It's respect. It's respect. It's loving respect. So thus, rather than lusting after a person, respect that person for who they are as a whole being, not just a body that is there to please you, because trust me, their body is not there to please you. Their body is a manifestation of their inner self. So, that being the case, see the whole person. See them as who they are, as the history that they have had, as the desires and the disappointments and the joys and everything that they have had throughout their life. See them as a personality first and foremost. Respect them fully as a person, not as a thing. And in that way you will avoid this unwarranted lust. Very good. Secret hatred. And it's interesting that this is indeed how this is translated. Not just hatred, but secret hatred, a type of stewing within, where indeed you hate others. And especially, of course, we're talking about the objects of this hate being individuals who don't deserve it. They're pretty innocent people. For some reason, they rubbed you the wrong way in your misperception. They rubbed you the wrong way. They may have innocently said something that you have taken offense at. No one else in the room did, but you did, etc., etc. And as a result, you not only hate that individual, but it's a type of hate that is internalized within you. To quote this, it's a secret hate. It's a hate that is simply there, stewing like poison in your mind and in your heart. And again, you have no control over it. At least you think you don't, of course. You see, that's the thing with all these things that we seemingly don't have control over. We can. We can. So this idea of having this secret hatred toward individuals who, we think that they've slighted us, we think that they've insulted us somehow. Very often it's just a misperception on our part. They were saying a joke and they really didn't mean anything badly by it or anything. They just said something that we misinterpreted, etc., etc. Or we can just hate them, again, for many of these other reasons, just because of envy or something like this. But it's a hatred that we keep deep within our heart, deep within our mind, but which harms us. And why? Why? Because it is indeed like a poison that is there now within our heart, within our mind. Envision, if you can, you know that there are many different kinds of poisons in the world. Imagine, if you can, that someone takes a syringe full of poison and quite literally puts that poison into your brain. And as you're now going on with your day-to-day activities, you understand that poison is now operative in your brain, literally dissolving brain cells by the millions. And as each day goes on, you're just kind of feeling it. Well, this is a type of non-empirical poison when we have hatred within our heart, within our mind. And in the same way, it begins to dissolve us from within. It dissolves all of those finer inner qualities that are there that we need in order to be intelligent, wise, spiritual, and good individuals. So we are to avoid this type of this secret hatred as much as possible. What is the opposite of this type of hatred? It's empathy. It's empathy. It's attempting to see things from the perspective of that individual who we hate and trying to understand, well, okay, I feel kind of slighted and insulted. No one else in the room noticed, but when this person said it, oh, he kind of glanced at me for a second. Oh, it must have been directed toward me. So now I feel intense hatred toward this person. Well, let me think about it. Was this person really directing it at me? There are a bunch of people in this room. I guess he had to look at someone for a split second as he's talking, and that was just an inopportune moment for him to happen to look at me. Now I think he was talking about me. But I have no bad history with this person. Why would he be saying this about me? And in this way, you begin to have empathy toward the person, and you understand, no, it's just an innocent joke on his part. He wasn't directing it toward you. Just egotism on your part, thinking you're the center of reality. But in actuality, he wasn't thinking about you at all. You were just another part of the audience. So, let's go on. Neglect to keep the senses under control. This is another extremely important one. We have 5 senses, 6 if you consider the mind to be a sense, which yogically it is indeed considered to be a sense. There are the 5 outward senses by which we have the ability empirically to discern that which is around us as external objects, phenomena, concepts, etc. We have the ability to sense those things via the 5 empirical senses. But then we have a 6th sense, according to yoga and Vedic spirituality, known as manas, known as mind, by which we now perceive internal states. This is one of the features of mind. This is yoga psychology, which teaches us this, yoga philosophy of mind and chitta, mind substance. So mind has the ability, in the same way that the senses can perceive outward, mind perceives inward. We can detect our emotions. We can detect many states that are going on within us through that sense of mind. But in any case, we have these 6 senses. And the senses are just tools, like a hammer, like a telescope, like glasses, like any other tool. And like any other tool, a hammer, for example, can be used for either good or bad. You can use it for its intended purpose. That is, you take the hammer and you hammer nails and you construct something wonderful and creative and something useful, functional. or you can bash somebody in the head with that same hammer. It's a tool that can be used for good or for bad. In the same way, this is true for the senses. The senses are meant to be used in a positive way, functionally, for what the senses were designed for. The senses are there to serve as the medium for data that exists, again, in the external world to then bring to the mind's perceptual apparatus, such that now we have that data rather than just out here within manas, the storehouse of mind, such that now intellect can use that data to think. All right? And there are other reasons also for the senses. There are more base reasons. We can smell something to see if maybe the food has gone bad, etc., etc. But the point is, the senses are a tool, and we can use them appropriately, or we can, in the same way, take that hammer and, in this case, rather than bashing someone else over the head with it, bash ourselves in the head with that tool known as a hammer. In the same way, we can use our own senses to harm ourselves. And how? We become addicted to the sensation of the senses. We become addicted, again, getting back to gluttony, to eating. We become addicted to sounds, to music. You see, I love music. Everyone loves music. But there is such a thing as appreciating and enjoying music versus needing music, being addicted to music. At all times, you have to have sound blaring. We know that there are people who grew up in families where they had the television blaring for 20 hours a day. People would be eating dinner, the TV blaring in the background, etc., etc. There are people who are indeed addicted to sound, and I can go on with all the senses. We are to keep the senses under control, in accordance with what this verse is saying, meaning, indeed, use the senses as a tool. Don't become a slave to your senses. And now let's go on to the very last of these, and neglecting to concentrate the mind. So indeed, this is a fault. If we have a mind that is uncontrolled, in other words, if we cannot concentrate the mind, but rather the mind is like an unbridled, uncontrolled, wild, and feral horse that just runs everywhere at will, and that is dangerous, because if we get too close to it, it will attack us. It will try to kick us to death. And we can't really do anything with the horse. Again, we get too close, it will either attack us or it will run away. And there's no control over this horse. In the same way, the mind also, like I was saying about the senses, is a tool. The only way that we can use the mind in a positive way is by controlling it, by having awareness of what the mind is doing at any given time, by not allowing the mind, again, like a wild horse, to just go wherever it wants and being a slave of that mind, and allowing the mind to drag our attention wherever it wishes to go, here and there, this topic, this subject matter, this fear, this anxiety. But rather, we use the mind as a sharpened instrument, as a sharp sword, in such a way that, indeed, we will tell the mind what it is being used for at this particular moment. Right now, I am studying. How many of you have studied anything? High school, college, anywhere on your own? Well, what ideally do we wish to do? We wish to say to our mind, right now I am studying. No, you're not going to fantasize. No, you're not going to be elsewhere. No, you're not going to be bored. Right now, you are a tool that I am using to absorb information, and that is all you're going to do for me right now. This is control over the mind. So now, having said all this, how indeed do we transcend? How do we rid ourselves of all of these faults? Now finally we go to the very last of the sentences here. The eradication of these faults takes place through the means of liberation termed yoga. Yoga. Yoga is Sanatana Dharma in practical application. You see, it's sad that almost every time that I mention yoga in one of my talks for the first time, I need to explain that, of course, what's meant by yoga is not just doing a headstand, not just the physical aspect, but the full spectrum of yoga sadhana, yoga practice. That includes yoga philosophy, yoga psychology that indeed includes all of the actual practices, including the asanas, including pranayama, including yama and niyama, the ethical proscriptions and prescriptions of yoga, and on and on. More than anything, dhyana, meditation. So it is in indeed practicing sadhana, by practicing spirituality, not just thinking about it, not just coming to a live stream once in a while and absorbing a little bit of information and then going away. No, it is by practicing spirituality, true spirituality, under the tutelage of a guru and a path that has been revealed, not made up. So thus authentic, an authentic path of yoga. It is in this way that we can indeed transcend all of these faults and cultivate the very opposite. And which will lead to, ultimately, liberation. Liberation, liberation. So thus, this is the answer. If we find faults within us, and again, maybe some of these faults you can relate to, maybe all of them, maybe just a few. This is just the tip of the iceberg, of course. Apastamba was giving just a summation of some of these faults. There are more faults that he could have spoken about. We know there's a very big list, but these are some of the main ones that people can indeed relate to, because there are faults that, again, are pretty universal, that many people have. The way that we can transcend these faults is by, number one, understanding what is the nature of these faults. So thus, I've explained to you the nature of these faults. So again, having an enumeration, having a list, so that you understand what these faults are and that they are faults, understanding why they arise, from whence they arise, and understanding what are their opposites, and understanding how you should cultivate the opposite, and then overall, what is that path by which ultimately you can defeat, you can rid yourself of all these faults, that being yoga. So now with that understanding, I ask all of you out there to please, under any and all circumstances, if you can relate to any of these faults or faults that were not even listed here, never lose hope. Never give up. Never think that these faults are with you permanently or forever, because they're not. You see, if this were the case, then this verse would not be talking about the eradication of these faults. These faults, even if you have them, even if you have all of them, even if you've had them for most of your lifetime, if not all of your lifetime, they are not you. They are not you. It's similar to, wearing a nice curtain now. It's a light-colored curtain. Well, imagine if I had some stain on the kurta. Something, some black, brown, some sort of stain, and it stands out. Oh, it doesn't look good. Oh, I wish it wasn't there. But it's not me. I can wash it out. If I need to, I can just take the kurta off. The stain is not a part of me. It's not a part of my soul. In the same way, you may have these faults, but they're like a stain on top of your clothes. Oh, it doesn't look good. You don't want it there. You want to get rid of it. People see the stain that's there. You don't want that. But you're not the stain. You're that beautiful Atman that is there within. You are that being of light that is a reflection of God. That is a spark of God's essence. That is who you are, with no faults. So number one, know that about yourself, that these faults may be there. They may have been there for a very long time. It may be hard to get rid of them. It may take you a few years, but they are not you. And if you are determined enough, with enough determined and strong will, with enough effort, with enough faith, that you are not alone in this endeavor, but that God is with you, you will transcend those stains, those faults. So never lose hope, never give up, never fear, have faith that you will transcend these faults. You will rid yourself of all of these inner faults that you may have. And what will be left will be the very opposite of all the darkness. You will perceive yourself as a being of goodness and of light, and of wonder, as a reflection and a servant of God. Very good. Wonderful. So with that, we're going to stop here. Sadly, this was a serious talk. I felt I had to give this talk because, again, it's a very good verse. It's something that almost every human being out there can relate to. And it's something that people need to think about. We need to be very open. We need to look in the mirror at ourselves and these various faults that we have. And we have to know how to transcend them. And we have to know that we are not these faults. And thus we can transcend them. So sadly, not going to have time for questions and answers. We only have about 4 minutes. And that doesn't really do justice to answering questions. Rather, the next time that we get together, certainly, I will try my best to leave time for questions and answers. But in the meantime, let me simply repeat, please subscribe to this channel if you can. Like this video if you can, please, because it helps with all the algorithms, and thus more people will see this video and will be benefited from the information that's presented here. Please visit Dharma Central when you can. And when you're there, join our email list. Look at all the books that we have available that go infinitely more in depth into these topics that we spoke about today. And become a member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society if you can. We need your help to continue to bring these messages to millions of other people out there in the world. So please help us in any way that you can. Please join our Discord server. I have not been watching the chat really at all, so hopefully someone has put up a link to our Discord server. Our Discord community has been growing so rapidly since it was established. I'm not sure exactly when, maybe a year ago, roughly, give or take. It is a beautiful, safe haven. It is a community, an online community of individuals who are interested in specifically Sanatana Dharma, not any religion. If you go there and start asking questions about other religions, you're not going to get answers, because the Discord server is dedicated to Sanatana Dharma, as is taught by the International Sanatana Dharma Society. So if you want to go there with humility and with a sense of true philosophical inquiry, then please feel free to join, and you will find fellowship with many hundreds of individuals who, like you, want to understand Sanatana Dharma to a deeper extent and to a much better degree. So with that, we will stop here. God willing, I will see you again next Monday at 7 p.m. And with that, I thank you all very much for being here. Namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate. In every field, in every sector, in every area in creation, may Dharma be victorious. Evam bhavatu. May it be so. Until the next time that we see each other, everyone, please take very, very good care of yourselves. Namaste.